Okay, hey everybody. Just a couple things. Just first, I know there's only 4 votes for this right now, but we still have a vote for C. I don't know if that was there earlier today, but not, I forget. I guess that had to be, right? And the answer here was A, and it's a little different than the question from yesterday. It was clear to me why somebody might have confused a rebellion with another rebellion, but this time I'm not really sure why C would be an answer. It's complete opposite, right, of what the anti-federalists want. In fact, anti-federalists, and here you have federal government being strengthened. So something to watch, and I'm going to ask people to help out, in making this more clear for those people who might be having trouble with it. So if you have an idea, if you have a way that made somebody, one of these 3 voters, in other words, who put A and were right, just maybe you want to take a look at that again for us as a class and just maybe shed a little light on the subject to some other people. Okay? And I appreciate it. So some things we need to know before we move on through American history. First, just a couple of definitions. I know you guys love those definitions. Partisanship is just simply identification with one party, it should be or another, excuse me. But non-partisanship would be something that's the basis is with no party, of course. Bipartisanship would be, of course, with the 2 parties, come to some compromise or agreement. But just partisanship in general is a word we really need to understand going forward. So let's make sure we do understand those. A party caucus. A caucus is a meeting. So a party caucus is a meeting of party leaders. If it's a Federalist, and you can expect Hamilton would be there. If it's a Republican, you can expect Jefferson would be, maybe not there physically, but I don't mean that these guys are there physically, but that they have a big say in the movements therein. A couple of other things. We'll take a look at this more deeply tomorrow, but there is a clause within the Constitution that is part of Article 1, Section 8. It's the final clause in Article 1, Section 8. It's known as the Necessary Proper Clause or the Elastic Clause. And it is really the part of the government that will be used by people like Hamilton to first make his thoughts about the president being able to declare neutrality relevant, right? When the Congress isn't there, we have to be flexible, we have to do, but most importantly, for the creation of a bank. Right? One of the proposals made by Alexander Hamilton was the creation of a bank to deal with all these economic issues, and the reality is that you have, nothing in the Constitution saying you're able to do this, so he's going to use this clause as a means by which to make that relevant. All right, so something to come back to, but something that you really need to be aware of. All right. Other than that, just before we get into history again, strict versus loose construction, we hit on that again with the president being able to declare neutrality argument, right? We know at this point Jefferson is the strict constructionist. He is the guy that's going to, basically, the way I've always equated to it, guys, is imagine you're a kid, maybe you're a young adult like yourself, and your parents say you can't have people over. You can't go out, let's put it this way, let's put it in reverse. You're not allowed to go out tonight. Someone who observes that strictly would mean that what my parents said was, I'm not allowed to go out tonight. I'm sure they imply that means I can't have anybody over. Okay, so Jefferson would be that kind of kid. His parents say you can't go out. His feeling is going to be, well, I'm probably not supposed to have anybody over either. Hamilton would observe it a little bit differently in this example, right? He would say, well, my parents said I can't go out. They didn't say I can't have anybody over, so I'm going to follow what they said a little more loosely in terms of following the rules. So what's written here is just a little more about that. So again, the president being able to declare neutrality argument is in line with that argument. So this comes up again and again and again, but we've already seen it with the president being able to declare neutrality. Election results, okay, there's a couple things we do need to be aware of there. In 1792, these are the election results. So Washington served 1 term in office. We have 16 states now in the Union. In 1792, Washington's still a huge favorite with 97, almost 98% of the vote, right? He's being labeled here as a Federalist. Okay, John Adams is second in the running, and during this period of time, if you have the second most votes, you become vice president. That was the system. Okay, the system at this point clearly is not built for partisan politics. Okay, and obviously that would be the understanding. If in 2013, for example, Obama and Romney, or in 2012, Obama and Romney went at it, right, for the presidency in 2012. Under this system, if it existed the same way as it doesn't. But if it existed the same way in 2013, our president would be Obama, and our vice president would be Mitt Romney. Okay, so it's not really built for party politics. But this is the lineup. So John Adams does have a lot of popularity, but not even close, right? Not even close to what Washington has here. So just keep that in mind, okay? So electoral college, of course, is what we're looking at. So if you look at the spread, right, Washington has the electoral vote majority in every single state. Okay, so he still is Washington. He's still that important, right? So we'll skip over the the element of some of the residuals that Washington means for Adams, because the truth is, if you have this kind of popularity, okay, it's going to be really hard to follow that act, no matter who you are. John Adams is a brilliant guy, important, so important in American history, but you know what? When you have this kind of popularity, there's very little you can do, all right? In 1796, however, okay, Adams is elected president, and Washington does not run again. He refuses. He retires. He goes to Mount Vernon, and he, goes back to his lifestyle of farming and so on and so forth. But there's no one saying that he can't run again. He is deciding this. And after that, that tradition, out of respect for Washington, will be carried through. After 2 terms, right, I'm done. John Adams is then elected president. Okay, he is still a Federalist, and Thomas Jefferson is the Democratic Republican who got the second highest amount of votes, and then becomes his vice president. So you have again a president. Now, no, actually for the first time, you have a president and a vice president who, to this point, at least politically, can't stand each other. Right? They're from 2 different parties. Hamilton still holds a lot of sway over Adams, just like he had over Washington, and Jefferson knows that. Jefferson and Hamilton are bitterest of political enemies here. Right? So keep that in mind. This was the spread for Adams. Remember, it's still that sort of purple color there. All right? And if you see just the sectional lines, Adams got pretty much the Atlantic vote and the northern vote. That's Adams' vote. Jefferson got the southern and western vote. So the 1796 election is certainly showing a different sectional tale than was this, where Washington had popularity in every state, doesn't matter where you were, Atlantic, west, northern, southern. It just didn't matter, okay, for Washington. So for Adams' presidency, so hopefully we've cleared some of the context here. Here's some of the way through the context towards some more of the history. So Adams' presidency is sort of, he's dealing with a lot of the elements that Washington had to deal with in the politics. He basically inherits a cabinet, right? He's decided to keep his cabinet that he has. So he has Hamilton, right? He has, or at least for a period of time, Hamilton eventually will retire from that position himself to do other things. He has all the big names, basically, Knox and so on and so forth. So you have a couple things. So since Jay's Treaty, a residual, right, one of these residue left over from Washington is what I mean by residual. Okay, now he has to deal with the outcome of Jay's Treaty. So France begins its own dynamic moves regarding British impressment of American sailors. It's much more aggressive, actually. In fact, they're just executing American sailors who are found on British ships, right? Because remember, France is still at war with Britain. The United States has taken a big step in Jay's Treaty in allying itself, not with anybody specifically, but as far as trade is concerned, with the British over the French. The French are not happy about this. The French government has become even more revolutionary at this point. Okay, not Napoleon revolutionary yet, but you won't call that revolutionary, but the Directory is now in charge. So as a result of this, now poor Adams as president has to deal with this issue, right? And one of the things that he does, or the biggest thing that he does, is try to make peace. Okay, he sends 3 negotiators, three delegates. And this becomes what's known as the XYZ affair. And they go to France, and they go there to inspire peace, as I've written here. Okay, as soon as they get to the gate, let's imagine, they knock on the gate, and the French government is not allowing them to even come into negotiations with them at all. They're not even allowing that to happen until they give them a bribe, and I believe there's a loan involved too. Okay, the French government's obviously falling on hard times. Okay, now these unnamed negotiators from the United States, okay, sent by Adams, refuse. They find this very insulting. The United States is a new nation in the world, they're there to create peace in the Atlantic, at least, and on the Atlantic. And the French government are not treating them well at all. And this inspires, first of all, huge positives for the Federalists, because they look like heroes. This whole time they've been saying the French are bad. It's a bad place. They're bad guys. They're doing the wrong thing. We don't want to follow that spirit of '76. And it makes Jefferson and the Republicans look pretty bad. Okay, it's kind of like the Citizen Genet affair all over again. It's sort of this sort of hostile French, and anybody associated with them is not going to look good. They're going to look guilty by association, because the Republican Party is so in tune with the French way and mode of thinking. They're going to look bad. They're going to look bad that way. Okay, and the British aren't looked at in that way. So what it sets off, though, is a lot of popularity in Congress. It's still controlled by the Federalists for the most part. I mean, the presidency is controlled by the Federalists. Congress is more or less controlled by the Federalists, and the Supreme Court is controlled by the Federalists. So the Federalists do have a lot of control here, but remember, the Federalists are looked upon in many ways as warmongers, and there could be some trouble there. So Adams has to temper the Federalists, okay, and in many ways appease the Republicans. Okay, he's trying to do what Washington was able to do, but without Washington's popularity. So it's a little difficult, very difficult, very difficult. Some of the things that the Federalist Congress then passes are new taxes. Why not? Why wouldn't they do that? All right, direct taxes 1798 is particularly hurtful. All right, taxes property, taxes slaves, for example, and this is going to hurt them all over the United States, but particularly when it's slaves, it's going to hurt them in the South. So again, it's another sectional thing. The expanded military with Hamilton in charge of the military, okay, is not going to look good for the Federalists, right? It's not going to give them popularity. So all the popularity they had, or mustered the XYZ affair, making the French look bad, they're now using, but they're really spending that credit pretty quickly. All right, a new naval department to fight on the high seas, to protect themselves, to protect their merchant ships, really is the point there, as a member of the cabinet. So all of these instances, right, all these three things here will hurt the popularity of the Federalists, but not as much as this. Okay. Now, it's something that Adams reluctantly signs into law. The president has to sign this bill, right, and through Congress, before it actually can become a law. He knew there was going to be trouble with this. If you asked him today, he'd probably say it was a bad idea, but he signs it anyway. What the Alien Sedition Acts do, okay, is they target, basically, people who are more than likely going to vote with the Republican Party. Okay, Irish, and of course French, but people that are in that Republican camp, okay, they'll deport, okay, aliens they feel are going to be hurtful or cause some kind of trouble. Like Citizen Genet would have been deported under this, okay. Sedition, or writing, saying things that in the media, or whatever it might be, that might be hurtful or just downright embarrassing to the federal government, can be silenced. People can be arrested under this. It's a sweeping legislation, okay? And it looks, honestly, it looks tyrannical. It looks abusive, okay? It makes the federal government and the Federalist Party look really, really bad, okay? So to counter this, you have Jefferson and Madison, who realize they have no control of the presidency, they have no control really in Congress to do anything, and they don't have control of the Supreme Court. So they are at a loss. So they go to the states, right? They go to the states. They're states' rights advocates, at least Jefferson is, for the most part anyway, right? And Madison is certainly picking his side now, if you know what I mean, okay? And what they do is they write the Virginia and Kentucky resolves, or resolutions, right? Kentucky resolution is written by Jefferson, Madison writes the Virginia version, okay? This directly countered, as an argument, the Alien Sedition Acts, okay? So one is literally following the other, okay? First real articulation of states' rights, and the reality is what they're trying to do is here, okay? It is to nullify federal law, okay? They feel the states have the right to do that. And the reason they feel the states have the right to do that is because they feel the states wrote the Constitution in the first place, and they should have the right to rid this country of poor laws, lawmaking, and so on and so forth, hurtful legislation that is by the Constitution, okay? This opens up a big argument, because people like Hamilton will eventually say, hey, listen, it wasn't the states. The states were the problem to begin with. That's why we created the Constitution. It was not the states, it was the people. That's why the Constitution says, we the people, in order to form a more perfect union, not we the states, okay? So again, a huge argument erupts between Hamilton, the Federalists, and Jeffersonian Republicans once again. Now, the Virginia and Kentucky revolutions really go nowhere, but they're an important symbol for what happens next.